Welcome to Grounded Spirits Podcast, where we stay rooted while flying high. I'm your host, Laura Lynn, and today we are going to get into the nitty-gritty of the differences between spirit and soul, and mind and body, and how we can integrate all four of them together. So, a little background. I believe that we're always fighting ourselves, and whatever is on the internal gets projected outward, right? So if we are constantly fighting with ourselves, so if your stomach's telling you that you're hungry but you refuse to eat, but if you're the same person or like the same being, why can't your stomach just go and eat something? Same with going to the bathroom. People are always holding it. Or trying to go to sleep where your eyes are so heavy, they're so tired, but your brain is just like going 90 miles a minute. So like, why are these why do these differences occur? Similarly, when we're thinking about the mind, body, and spirit, originally, and I'm pretty sure I said this maybe like 2 years ago on this show, that I didn't know the difference between soul and spirit. So I thought that they were just different words for the same, with the same meaning. And now I know that that's not the case, and so that's what we're going to go into today. But on this exploration, even though I came up with a really good model for the four, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, go to Grounded Spirits on Instagram, and I put up a table that's what we're going to talk about today, is like going through this table so I could so you can understand it better and really get down to what the meaning is of each of these different aspects of human nature. And I say human nature, but we're going to see some of the texts that I bring up that this could apply to absolutely everything. Even, I'm in a car right now, and so even this car could have a mind, body, soul, and spirit. So that's super interesting to think about. So we'll get into that. But what I did want to say is, as I was developing this chart, so this chart is a culmination of 4 years of intense research, just an intense flow of knowledge that I have processed and distilled into this lovely chart. But here are some questions, or some limitations, if you will, of the chart. I haven't quite put my finger on where heart is. So a lot of times we say, listen to your heart, not your head. And so we get the head part, right? Like the head is the logic, so that's clearly, easily mind. But with heart, does that mean your body, or does that mean your soul? Or is there a third, or like a tertiary level where, or maybe not even tertiary, just secondary, a secondary level that combines them? So maybe heart is when the soul and the body combine. So now I'm like getting into Rene Descartes' theory of union as its own separate category. So we'll explore that today too. So yeah, I don't know where heart is, and I don't really know where ego is, because you would think that it's the mind, and it very well could be. But there are some aspects of ego that do not necessarily coincide with mind. So we'll get into that as well. Okay, so we're going to begin on the chart that is on Instagram at Grounded Spirits. It's the handle. And on the chart, you would think that we would start at the beginning, but we're going to start at the bottom. So the bottom are the aspects of each of the aspects of human nature. And like I said, I keep saying human nature, but we'll talk about that in a bit. So I want to go over the aspects of each of these. So for soul is an individual. So the way that I kind of see it is, for instance, okay, like when you're making bread and you have this huge clump of dough, and so that dough is source or God. I would even put like universe, infinite intelligence. That's all that. So all of that matters. So it's that dough. And then you go in and you start making dough balls. And so the dough ball is its own individual, unique piece. Even though it is made of the same stuff as the larger piece, and you could put all the dough balls together to form the larger piece, it's still its own individual self. And so that's why we're starting at the soul, because it's the most internal bit. So it's like a ring. And so soul is the center, like Russian dolls, if you will. Soul's at the very bottom of that, or the smallest doll. Soul is also infinite. So we can go so deep in our soul, we'll never be able to fully learn ourselves. And so going back to that dough example, it would be as if each dough ball had a black hole in it. It might be stable, but we could always pull more out. Or for instance, like a Mary Poppins bag, where it's infinite. You can keep pulling. You will never run out of soul. And lastly, soul has matter. And matter is, I looked up the definition actually. It has to have some kind of weight. It has to have some kind of extension, as Rene Descartes would say. That's how he would define matter. If you can extend it into the 3 dimensions, it's matter. And you would think that a soul is non-matter, right? Like the only thing that's actually quote unquote real, that we can empirically see, would be the body. Because we can touch it, we can hold it, we can smell it, taste it. But, and there have been experiments on this, that the second that a person dies, they drop weight. Like I think it's like 1/8 of a pound or something. Like it's like tiny. Well, not that tiny, it's still something. But it's substantial, where the soul did have weight, did have this matter. And if you think about it, back to the dough balls, it's encased in its own little skin, even though it was part of something else. You know, like when you make bread, if you've made bread, it gets a skin that you could like cut, and it's gonna be different than the dough inside. And I think it's just like the oxygen or in the air or whatever that makes it a little harder on the outside. But I think you could say that about anything, like cake, for instance. If you cut a slice, it forms like a skin, and then you have like the soft cake on the inside. So I kind of see it the same way with soul, that the second that it was clipped off of source, then that is when it turned into matter, when it entered the body and became part of the body. And that's the interesting part, that I'm starting this work because we learned in Gestalt psychology that the sum equals the parts, or the parts equal the sum, same thing, right? So my thinking is, if we can split these 4 things up, like people have been doing for centuries, if we split these different things up with the purpose at the end goal is to separate them, to understand them, to fulfill their needs, so that then we can all come back together and stop fighting, right? Like that's the goal. That's the reason for the work. But my question is, once we come back together and we stop fighting, does that mean that we fuse, like physically fuse together, where we won't be able to tell the difference between a soul, body, or spirit? How can we put something together? How do I put it? It's like that. Have you ever seen, I think it's on Instagram or something, it's a post where it's like a love post when you are dating somebody and you start morphing into them, and then it's like these two little gummy bears that, like, one's yellow and one's red, and they're like fusing, and so like there's like this red yellow going on at like their bottom. But I kind of see it like that, where in 500 years or something, people may just naturally be integrated, where they wouldn't even be able to differentiate any part. Because the whole point of this too is, we always hear like that adage of like, Jesus take the wheel. By the way, Jesus is the mind, so we'll talk about that in a little bit, but Jesus take the wheel. So, or we say like, become the driver of your life, get into the front seat, like you have the power to do it, like motivational speakers say that all the time. But if you're not in the driver's seat, or for instance, when Jesus takes over the driver's seat, then where are you? Like, who are you? And I would like to think that it's kind of like Inside Out, where you have this panel, and the panel is soul, mind, body, spirit, and then whoever needs to like step up for that situation will step up, just like in Inside Out, when like disgust would come out or anger would come out. They each would come out when they needed to. So that's how I see it. But if we're so integrated in the future, it might not even make sense to say, oh, my body feels this, but I feel that, or my heart, my head, stuff like that. So that's the goal. Coming back to this, so the other individual is mind. Mind is its own individual thing. Like, no one can hear your thoughts. And even like psychics, I don't even think psychics could actually like go into your head and listen to your thoughts, because turns out some people don't even have like verbal thoughts. They have like pictures and stuff. It's like, that's odd. But your mind is your own individual safe place, and no one can be a part of that. On the other side, body and spirit are both part of the collective. So body, it's kind of like when you go to a baseball game, and then people start doing the wave, and it just goes around, and you just know, you just like connect. It's kind of like Avatar. You like connect into it, into the vibe, and your body just does it. Or any like stomping your feet, clapping your hands, stuff that happens in groups. It's really easy for you to follow along. It has to do with those mirror neurons. Like if you're watching somebody, that's why like Zumba classes are so fun, because your body is really good at like getting into formation, like being part of the group, because your body is not meant to be alone. Your body needs connection, and that's like the very human part. And then if you think about it, humans, just like plants or animals or whatever, we all need each other. We all are part of this earth, and I think that humans forget that sometimes. I feel like we have separated ourselves so much from nature that we forget that we are inherently part of it. We are in this meat suit that was created of the resources of this earth. And that's why when we die, we go back to the earth. And I think that's so beautiful of this like reciprocity sequence. Similarly with spirit is like the vibe that you give off, the aura, the like a vortex, a magnetic vortex that humans naturally project. Yet it's invisible. And I said it's part of the collective because when you're at a concert or something, or even like at the baseball game, like I was saying earlier, when you're a part of that, you can feel the energy. You vibe with the crowd, like as one. It's not like you're just trying to vibe with individual people. You connect, you can feel the energy surrounded all around. And it's so cool because a hockey game energy is going to be different than a Taylor Swift concert energy, that's going to be different than a Kuko concert energy compared back to the baseball game. You are like a movie theater. Movie theaters have, or like the theater, like opera and stuff. It's the same. It's just people grouping together, but the vibe is so different. And you can't even really explain it with words because it's such a deep feeling that humans innately have. And so it's part of the collective. Next we have infinite or not infinite. So we said that soul is infinite. Spirit is also infinite. So exactly what I was saying before. It's like as if they had like black holes. So I can exude my energy forever. Well, look at Taylor Swift. She was gone all over the world. Everybody can feel her energy. That's wild. Everybody can feel her energy. And that's why she's low-key causing a divide. People either 100% love her or 100% hate her. There's very rare people that are in the middle, just like whatever about Taylor Swift. She's very polarizing. And that's because spirit is infinite. So as she projects her energy, the whole world can feel it. That's insane. But it also kind of shows, like, you know, that whole story of that like no one could run under a 4-minute mile. Like, it's impossible. No one can do it. It's beyond human capabilities. And then once the first guy ran a 3:59, people kept doing it. And like, there was this one thing, like, this is a little much, so I don't know if it's necessarily true, but I heard that, like, now high schoolers can do it too, that it's, like, not that impressive to run under a 4-minute mile anymore, but that at one time it was impossible. So I feel like people like Taylor Swift, because what's wild is that Taylor Swift, like, she's not even complete yet. Like, she's still in her caterpillar phase. She's still in her ugly duckling phase. Like, yeah, she's had more of a glow up, but, like, she's not there yet. Like, she's gonna be, like, a sex goddess. Like, she's gonna, like, it's gonna be, like, one of those, girl next door types that turn to, like, that sexy vixen kind of person. Like, that's gonna be Taylor Swift. And she's, like, stepping into that dark feminine energy that, if she really is a Scorpio rising, like everyone says, which is what she actually, like, that's her destiny to, like, step into. And you can see, like, little bits, and it's, like, been really cool to, like, watch her blossom over the years. Because I first became a Taylor Swift fan when I think I was a freshman in high school. Like, it's been a long time. But yeah, so yeah, spirit is infinite, soul is infinite, and so clearly mind and body are not infinite. Your body is going to deteriorate and die one day, as is mine, as everybody else's. But this is another thing that I believe. by integrating the mind, body, and soul, like, that means that you're not constantly at war with yourself. We've seen the effects of war on Earth and how depleting it is of resources. So if you're constantly fighting with yourself for 70, 80 years, yeah, your body's going to deteriorate and die. But if you're growing the communities that live within you, like all the different cells, and so the communities would be like tissue and muscle and the systems, you know? If you're taking care of them and they're not constantly at war, you don't have spiritual warfare against yourself, then imagine how much longer your body could live, or how you could slow down aging. I'm 31 years old and I still get carded. And it's not just like, oh, you get carded, because I know sometimes people are dumb and they still card like 50 or 60-year-olds. But if you were to ask anybody, people always say I'm under 25. So, and I think it's because, like I said, I've been working on this work my entire life. Well, since high school, that was like my first research project. Back then, it was on episodic versus semantic memory, and so looking at why is like the experience versus the facts, like why are they stored differently? And now I know it's because one is in the mind and one is in the body. Your memories are stored in your body. They're not stored in your mind. And so that's why it's the good or the bad, you know? Trauma gets stored in your body and gets passed down through generations. So yeah, your mind, and also your mind is not infinite. Your mind is the only thing that has limits. How people say, sky's the limit. No, it's your mind, your mindset. That's the limit. Like when you say, oh, that's just for them, that can't be for me, that's your mind setting the limit. And so now we can get into mind and ego. So mind and ego, it can go either way, right? So the ego is something that protects you, that keeps you an individual, that wants to like build you up, but sometimes by tearing others down. So I would say that ego is the baby of mind and body, because ego holds grudges, and I just said that memories are stored in the body, not in the mind. Interesting. So, to further prove this point, there is this guy in 1734. He is known as the first African scholar. So he was sold into slavery when he was 3 years old. But he somehow went to college. And his dissertation was debunking Descartes, basically. Well, not debunking Descartes, but basically saying like, hey, like your argument wasn't strong, so here's a strong argument, but I'm still in support of you, but like my argument like makes 10 times more sense of like what you're trying to prove. So he was saying that the mind can't feel, and so many of us are run by our minds that it's hard for us to understand when our bodies get sad. And so then we get mad at our bodies for being sad, and that just makes our bodies even more sad. And then you have like this like never-ending loop of like not being able to keep yourself happy. There was a time back when I was in Redlands that I kind of pictured it as my mind was this like masculine version of me, and my body was this feminine version of me, and my feminine side would just nag at my masculine side, and my masculine side felt that it wasn't getting appreciated by the feminine side. And it was just like this never-ending bickering. So I was saying that after many ego deaths, so I really do believe that ego is the mixture of mind and body, because it was kind of like a, what is it called? Like a litmus test, where it's like a range. So sometimes it would be more mind that would die and less body. And sometimes it would be more body and less mind. And then it kind of felt, this is going to sound so weird to say, but it kind of felt like when you're dating somebody and then you just have to break up because it's not going to work out. And then a new person comes, and then you try to work it out and it just doesn't work out. And so then a new person comes. But as each person comes, they get better and better and better. And so I always describe it with my math mind that it's like finding the limit. That you are trying to see how close can you get down to zero without actually hitting zero. So it's like trying to achieve, it's like blackjack. That you want to get super, super close, but you don't want to go over. I don't know what it means to go over in my analogy, but you just don't want to go over. So you start off at, let's say, 1. And you try it out, and that's like really far away. So then you get closer. Actually, I messed that up, so we'll do the other way. So you start at 2, then you go half, that's 1. And then you go half of 1, that's 0.5. Then 0.25, then you just keep going and going. So you can get closer and closer to that perfect person. And so I kind of feel like that's how it is internally, where you keep having to die and be reborn and die and be reborn. I remember when it first happened, and I was so excited. I'm like, I'm a butterfly now, and I came here on Grounded Spirits and told you guys all about it. And now I'm at the point where I've had hundreds of ego deaths, hundreds. Like some of them are very vivid, like jumping off of buildings, or like getting shot in the back of the head. Others are more peaceful, where I can just feel the energy like squirming out of me and going back into earth. Or sometimes, and now Goosebumps, they did a really good portrayal of like what it actually feels like to do this. At the end, and it's like the new one with Justin Long, there's a kid who had like worms inside of him, and he's throwing up the worms, and they're just like coming out. And like that's exactly how it feels to throw up energy. And I have done plenty of that, to the point where I experienced ego death. So all of that to say that ego is looking at how can we make a perfect union of mind and body. And that's all you need to have so many ego deaths, so that they do match up. So then you can get like that Sabrina and Harvey at the end of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, when the two hearts like magically line up perfectly. And I think that's what we're trying to do by having these ego deaths. So yeah, that's mind and body that are both non-infinite. Now moving on to matter or non-matter. We've already talked about soul, and a nice way to see that represented is that no one says that when you die the mind goes away and this body stays. We don't talk about mind like that. Mind is like it's like part of the body. If you're brain dead, you are thought to not have a mind anymore. The mind is gone. The mind is dead. The mind lives in the brain. So the mind is non-matter. You can't take away the mind and separate it from the body. Whereas with the soul, we were taught that the soul lives eternally even though the body perishes. So you can separate them. They are divisible. Whereas the body and the mind are not. Then we have soul and spirit. So soul, let me start this again. So soul is matter, mind is non-matter, body is matter, that's like a given, and spirit is non-matter. And I feel like that's kind of a given too. Like, you can't, I don't know. You can't, it's not like you can see your aura. Well, some people can. So this is the one that I was like really struggling with, to be honest, because in my Carlos Castaneda books, he talks about spirit the same way that Anne Conway does in her book. And she only has one book. It's like it has something to do with like ancient and modern philosophy, I believe it's called. But it's from the 1670s, Anne Conway. Whereas Carlos Castaneda's books, you just look up Carlos Castaneda and it's like 1970s when his stuff started coming out. Actually, I think his first book came out in 1968. But they both talk about it in the same way, spirit that is. And Carlos Castaneda, he says that it's like, he talks about it from the solar plexus, which is why when we get to chakras, I was a little confused with that too. So this is a working chart. So if you want to have some input, like drop a comment on Grounded Spirits or DM me on Grounded Spirits or groundedspirits@gmail.com. Yeah, let me know. So yeah, so here's where I'm at, where it comes from the solar plexus in Carlos Castaneda's book. And they're kind of like these ropes, these like light ropes that come out and you can like hold on to things. And I've felt them where I was like holding on too hard to people. And I had to like learn to like let go with these like string things that are coming out of my solar plexus. Because the other option would be to like cut it off. And I tried that one time and it was super painful and I couldn't do it. So I had to like learn how to undo things. And I feel like that was like, that's a hard lesson in of itself. But we all have these things. And I feel like that is part of spirit. And if you can hold on to, how can a non-matter hold on to matter? Oh, the whole point. In Carlos Castaneda, what happens is that this guy, he's able to like climb a waterfall, and Carlos Castaneda's like, what the fuck? Like, bro, how are you doing this? Because this is like an older man too, and he's like, he's just like watching him glide on up there. And then he's like trying to even look at his feet, like he's like wondering, are his feet even touching the rocks? Like, he's like so perplexed, like what is going on? Like, he's so confused, right? And then Don Juan, his mentor, they call him benefactor, but I feel like that's a weird term. His mentor, Don Juan, he gets so mad at him, and he's like, how could you not see that? Like, he's just like so disappointed that like Don Genaro, he wanted to show you this really cool thing because he thought that you might actually be able to see it. Like, you have been my apprentice for how long now? And you still can't see. You're still so tied to reason. You still live so much in your mind that you can't even fathom the beauties and the mysteries and the wonders of the world. And of course, Carlos feels like dejected, like, well, fuck, man, like, I wish that I could see it, like. And then he even has this like great line where he talks about needing logic and reason, like having like a ball in a chain. Like, he's like, it just weighs me down. Like, I wish I could be free from this prison. And I think that's a very like mind thing to say, to like view your mind as a prison. But if it's not infinite, then your mind really is a prison. And the only way And Amber Alert stopped it, so okay. So your mind is a prison, and the only way is to push it just push the corners, push the edges just a little bit bigger, and just to work on it that way. Because if ego is the mixture of mind and body, then that means that there has to be something that's mind and soul. What that is, I don't know. But there has to be. And if that's the case, then that means that you can blend these two, and form a different union. And since spirit or soul, whoever mind is teaming up with at the time, they could push it just a little further. And I think that that's important, because mind, I would assume that it's ruled by Saturn. Because it has that structure, it needs that bit. Really fast, super cool thing. I know I'm gonna go on this huge tangent, but it was mind-blowing that man, I can't. It's part of the zodiac, so we'll talk about it then. Okay, back to this. So mind can get pushed just incrementally, but it's still non-matter, and so is spirit. But I feel like spirit makes a little more sense, even though I just went that whole thing about how can non-matter hold on to matter, and I don't know. So that's something that I'll have to look deeper into. Okay, moving on to chakras. Actually, I think we're already, I really wanted to keep these at half an hour, so we might just be talking about these as we go. So I guess I'm gonna stop it here, and then next week I'm gonna jump over chakras and go into the zodiac and elements, so that I can tell you that really cool thing that I found. It's literally gonna blow your mind, and it has to do with the calendar. So that's why, again, this work is so important, because I feel like it touches on absolutely every little thing that we know about this reality and what that means for the future of civilization. And I'm just so excited that I have finally found this, because if you have been with me for a long time, you have known that I have been trying to find an actual dissertation topic that encompasses every single part of everything that I love, and is the essence of who I am, down to my core. So I have found that in this topic, and so I'm really, really, really excited to be able to share it with all of you. Something really important though is that this is grounded spirits. So that's the grounding stuff, right? How can we label things and make more sense of them to then be able to make better sense of ourselves. The spirit part is all about getting high. And I say that jokingly, because the spirit part is more than just about getting high, even though that I do really want that to be a focus. One day you're going to be able to go to a dispensary and buy grounded spirit products. So that's going to be really cool to do one day. Hopefully not that far into the future. I've already started kind of working on it. So there's that. But spirit is more of how can we ignite that passion inside of ourselves, and then be able to use that air to then blow it out into the universe and be able to impact everybody with our peace. And that's really what it comes down to with grounded spirits. And even with this whole thing that I was saying earlier about integrating soul, mind, body, and spirit. By integrating, you become peaceful. There's no need to fight. There's no need to feel anger, because anger is just letting you know that something's not fair and something needs to change. That's why you get angry. And of course, if you were just peaceful all the time, life wouldn't be fun. So I guess the whole thing I was saying about earlier, it's even though maybe there will be more merged than they are now, But you're always going to have to balance them. It's just like with chakras. Like, stuff happens. That's life. But I think that's also what makes life interesting. And it also is what allows you to learn and to experience and to have fun and to enjoy yourself and to feel alive. Maybe that's what the goal is. How do we feel more alive? It's not even about being happy. It's about being able to experience something that's so uniquely human while we're here on Earth. And so then that brings me back to the plant. So I love weed. I have been smoking since I was 18, and at the time, I think I was doing it more for clout, if we're being honest. But before that, like back like in Dare days, I always knew I was gonna smoke. Like I had already like identified as a smoker, even though I had never even smoked until I was 18. You know, so like I had already made the decision before I was ever even offered anything. For some reason, I just always felt so connected to it. And it wasn't until I met my husband, and he hated weed. Because I had never bought weed for myself ever, because guys would always just provide it. And it wasn't until my husband where I was like, man, like I need to smoke. I haven't smoked in a very long time. And he hates it. And so I'm like, what am I going to do? And then he ended up finding a pen. Like, I don't even know where he found it. But like, it was safe, and we just like got a new cartridge or whatever. And that's one I still use today. That's what I smoked before I started this episode. And the whole point is that weed, like, it meets you where you are, and it allows you to push on that mind box that I was talking about earlier. It allows you to merge your mind and your soul to be able to expand. Because my whole life, I was always very much in the mind. I always wanted to be a scientist, always wanted to be a philosopher, but always looking at everything through the lens that we're brought up with. It's like positivism. Another way, I kind of think that these are synonymous, but there probably is like some difference. But I would say it's also like reductionist. And so I'm really good in the mind. Hence, why I'm getting a PhD, right? And then when I took my sabbatical, it wasn't really, I just called it that. But basically, I kind of low-key quit my program and went off into the countryside for 2 years. And now that I'm in a philosophy class, I was just doing philosophy for 2 years and publishing all of my thoughts here on Grounded Spirits. And so now, being a philosopher comes so naturally to me because I've been practicing for so long. I can't believe that I've been doing Grounded Spirits for 4 years now. That's wild to me. It's not exactly, it's probably 3.5 because I started in September of 2020 and now we are in February of 2024, so a few months off, but you get what I mean. It's still mind-blowing. And so when I was being a philosopher, I got really in touch with my soul, and then using astrology, I was really able to get in touch with my soul. And now I'm in the process of getting in touch with my body and starting to dip into getting in touch with my spirit. And I feel like weed is what helped me go from the mind to the soul. I have been trying so hard and asking her so much if she can help me get in touch with my body. And I feel like she keeps saying yes to me. So if you smoke and you don't become a philosopher, just ask why. why anything about your life? Or even about yourself? Or even nothing about yourself, just anything. Just ask any why question and just allow yourself to go down that rabbit hole. Because when you're high, you're able to let go of things, where you're able to dive into others. I don't know how else to explain it. But yeah, just ask yourself the whys. And so that's why it's like grounded spirits too, because weed, to smoke it, you need all 4 elements. So obviously the fire to light it, you have the bud, which is the earth, you have the water and the bong, and then you blow out the air. So, and even like the plant, the fire is the sun, earth is the soil, water is water, and then the, what else did I miss? Fire, earth, air. Air is how, like, a dandelion, like you blow it so the seeds can disperse. So you need the air. And so that's why I feel like it's really good at helping that. And so I'm going to start Pilates tomorrow again. So I used to be really good at Pilates and go like 3 times a week. 3 times a day. But then kind of fell off when I met my husband. Just because I don't even know why, to be honest. It just wasn't on my priorities. My priorities were my husband. And I feel like now we're at a point where my body has been asking me like, hey, when are we going to get back into Pilates? So we'll see. I'll get high one day and go to Pilates and see if it helps, but I'm not sure. But it would be cool to have that thing, because with grounded spirits, as the name, it would be that weed meets you halfway, where if you are really airy and need to be more grounded like I was, weed will help you do that. And if you're too grounded and need to get a boost to come up, weed does that too. And I kind of saw that with me personally, like when I was like really depressed, like weed would just like help me a little bit. And that's why after this last ego death, like weed hasn't been hitting the same, because I feel like where weed would bring me to, I'm already here, like this high frequency naturally. So kind of upset about that, because I really do love weed. So my hope is that with Pilates, that it'll help me like get more in touch with my body. And I know that there are some studies out there where exercise does help with that. Like when you get high and go exercise, that it helps with that mind-body connection. So we'll see. I'll try that out, and then next week we'll get into it. I say next week, but you never know. Like maybe tomorrow I could do the astrology one, and then the next day do the chakra one. We'll see how it goes. I just don't want to make any promises, but for sure those episodes are coming soon, and I will see you next time. So bye, grounded spirits. Stay rooted and fly high. Bye.